So as we were talking about the situation in Jeju and the tragedy of Ki Hong, we figured it'd be better to speak to somebody who knows a little bit more about the situation in Korea as a whole facing the LGBTQ plus community on Jeju. And today we have with us Raphael Rashid, a Seoul-based journalist who specializes in minority issues and attempts to try to give voices to the voiceless. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to see you.
Hello.
First time I've seen your face, by the way, face to face. I meant to go. You came down to Jeju to do a program, and I meant to come visit you, but just time got away from me, and I couldn't get to that program.
Oh yeah, that was like 2 months ago, maybe.
Yeah, I want to say next time you're in town, though, I'll definitely be showing up.
All right, I'll let you know.
So, I was curious if it kind of sent shockwaves through Jeju when the news spread that he had died by suicide, and I was wondering if, because he is such a big important person here, what was the impact, if anything, in Seoul of his Z's passing?
Well, I think Kim Ki-hong was certainly, quite a visible person in the community, and didn't mind to speak his mind, to put his face, on the line, and also run as a proportional candidate for the Green Party last year, and also be an active member in, say, Jeju Pride organization. So
Queer festival, right?
Perhaps, I don't know how many people might have known Kim personally, but I certainly think people knew of Kim. People might have known Kim's name. And, I definitely think people were aware of Kim's activism or even be it as a politician or a teacher. And when the news hit of his passing the other day, I think it was, it was quite shocking. It was devastating, heartbreaking, and it certainly was felt across the community based on conversations I've had with acquaintances and friends who might have known Kim personally or not. And definitely there was a lot of conversations within forums and LGBTQ forums online.
Well, and this came at a time when Kyung passed. This also came at a time when there was two other prominent deaths in the community. So it really hit. It was a 1, 2, 3 impact on the community. Yeah. It was really tough time.
Yeah. So just before Kim's passing, it was about 1 or 2 weeks before, another transgender person unfortunately passed away, and then 1 week after the announcement of Kim's death, then there was unfortunately the news of Staff Sergeant Byung Hee-soo, who was quite high profile to some extent,
right.
If not the first, if not only transgender person to be out loud and proud and visible. Byung was, of course, the person who was disgracefully discharged from the Korean military after the Korean military found out that she had surgery, gender confirming surgery, and said that she was basically disabled or something like that.
Right.
So when you have these three deaths within such a short amount of time, it certainly shook the community, and I know that some people are still very much affected by it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, just recently I saw, I follow you on Twitter, but I also follow a lot of groups, and so I recently just saw there was a beautiful memorial in Seoul with the quilt dedicated to these 3 recent tragedies, and that was a beautiful sight, but really, really tragic that it had to happen.
And I really hate, I don't know how to say this in a nice way, but
Right.
I hate to say it, but these three deaths will have, I think, well, they would have brought the community closer together than ever before, but also pushed for more, pushed for people to demand more changes. And I think we're reaching somewhat of a bubbling point at the moment in Korea. One after the other, you have another incident, another homophobic, another transphobic incident, be it on TV or politicians' hate speech, and it's just one after the other. And I think these three unfortunate, tragic deaths have sparked even more of a conversation, and I think people are paying more attention to the situation in Korea. And it's not just in Korea, but international media are also catching on to what's going on in Korea. So, I'm guessing that because of these terrible events, that the situation, people will turn their attention to what's going on, and hopefully we will see something come out of this tragedy.
You said that really well. That was a beautiful way to say that.
It's forcing a conversation upon everyone. Well,
Right.
what also happened, it's overshadowed by the three tragedies, but also recently there's a lawsuit that was filed against the National Health Service because there was a couple who were on each other's plans, but once they found out that they were gay, they removed them from it. So they're now suing to get their equal rights. So it seems like from a legal standpoint, from a litigious standpoint, from a hopefully a cultural standpoint, because I believe that the younger generation's attitudes towards LGBT people are changing in Korea. Is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, I think I think there's two things. I think it's the attitude of the young generation, but also the young LGBTQ generation themselves. They're a lot more active and a lot more, they're aware of their surroundings, and they're a lot more vocal, and some of them just don't really care anymore. Of course they care, but they don't care about what other people may say. Even I did an interview a few years ago, and it was with gay soldiers currently serving in the army, in the military, and I thought that maybe they might not be so forthcoming, but on the contrary, several people came forward, and when they were telling, of course the stories were not so positive, but they were so brave to say that they would tell at their army base, they'll be like, "Yep, I'm gay, so what?" It doesn't mean that the response they got was a positive one, but many people are just have a completely different attitude, and I think that they know how to use their voice a lot more these days, and especially they're using social media and getting their messages across. And I think even the NGOs also know what they're doing a lot better than before, and pushing out messages in Korean, but also sometimes in English.
Agreed.
Yeah, knowing how to get the message across. So
very savvy.
No, I think so, things. I think they know that people definitely know how to make a more of an impact these days, and also, like you said, younger generations, like on the other side, are also more aware, and I think that they also understand. They might not be necessarily pro LGBTQ or whatever pro means, but at least they don't. Some people don't really, people starting to ask themselves, like, why are there such hateful people? Especially if you go to Seoul, queer festivals, something like that, you've got all the protesters, and it's like, on the one hand, the protesters are here to voice their discontent, but at the same time, regular passers-by who have no idea which side to to support, be on. On one side, you have people who are kind of minding their own business, not doing anything too provocative. On the other side, you've got these really, really, really angry people shouting really horrible things
Right.
with horrible messages. And for someone who has absolutely no idea what's going on or has no opinion, I think that they will realize that there is a bit of a problem going on. And I think more people are aware of the situation of discrimination and hate speech. Yeah. So yeah, I do, in a way, I think times are changing a little bit. Doesn't mean that there's been too much progress, but I think attitudes are slowly changing.
I say, you live on the mainland. Things in Jeju are often quite different than they are for the rest of the country. Gyeong also was the leading founder and the driving force behind the Jeju Queer Festival down here. And so to touch on what you were saying about the younger generation, for those festivals, as a participant or someone that came to support and be an ally, I was thoroughly impressed with the younger generations, just like you said, with their absolute sheer courage / comfortable in their own skin. This is a small community in Jeju. Everybody knows everybody. And to see the sort of, like I said, not even, it's not pride, just being comfortable, being like, this is who I am. Willing to participate, and really the young people came out in droves for the Jeju Queer Festival. Yeah. It was something to see. It was something to see.
See, the thing that people don't from the mainland don't understand about Jeju. Well, I mean, some do obviously. Is that it's incredibly tight knit. Like if you are dating anyone, they will find like. The Halmoni internet will find out, right? Like there's a story I always tell.
Have secrets, yeah.
I live in Jungmun. My wife is a native from here, and one day I was walking with he's like an 18-year-old boy. He had long hair. He's like a neighbor friend of mine, and I was just walking him to the bus stop, and my wife came to me the next day and said, Who's the girl you were walking with the other day? And I'm like, what do you mean walking with a girl? Yeah, I heard you were walking because someone had seen me he was trying to grow his hair at the time. So assumptions. Gosh. And then it came all the way back to my mother-in-law, and then back to me. So like it's truly small.
It really is. And so to see the bravery, I don't want to use that term. That's a little bit uncomfortable. To just see people living their lives as they wanted to live their lives Gyeong really had a huge impact in the community in Jeju. So and I know other people have had impacts in Seoul. So I want to ask you, if you don't mind, going back a little bit to politics. We have upcoming is the Seoul mayoral. Did I say that right? Mayoral election, and this is something I watch closely because often most people say that the Seoul mayor will be in direct line for running for the president of Korea. So I've been following it, not completely, but I've been following it. And then lately, though, I've noticed that there's just been a lot of the candidates have been quite vocal with homophobic statements and homophobic opinions. And I thought that, not shocked, but I'm surprised that it feels like the progress has maybe been gone back a few steps. Do you agree with that, or what do you see?
Has it gone back?
Is it just supporting the Christian vote?
No. Yeah, I think, to be honest, I don't think much it's not necessarily gone back. I just don't think things have changed much. I think for the current Seoul mayoral elections, right now, I don't think there's much politics going on. I mean, the biggest conversation ultimately has been coronavirus over the past year, and a lot of these candidates, they do exist and they have a certain maybe reputation or people know who they are, but they don't really know who these politicians are within the past year, like what they've actually done in the past year.
Because it's all been around COVID.
COVID. So then we have all these candidates, and people know their names, so that's about it. And then suddenly they're coming out trying to differentiate themselves by just jumping on the homophobic bandwagon, and I mean, out of the blue, trying to get the radical Christian vote. I don't know. So I don't, and I think the question is, no matter what election or high position whether it's an election or a high position you're going for, the question of whether you are for or against homosexuality will always come up. It's always come up, whether it's constitutional court judge, whether it's to become a minister, whether it's to become president, and minister, or mayor now. So wherever, no matter what it is, this question is always going to come up.
Okay.
It's the one question to derail your candidate, and because it's a kind of impossible question, not an impossible question, but it's just, even if you are pro, you can't really say it out loud, and you have to say it to some extent. You have to say that you support equality. You support,
like Moon, yeah.
You half-heartedly say a bit of both, but
right.
I mean, it's unfortunate that these tactics are still being used. It's unfortunate, especially in Seoul, because as you said, the person who becomes Seoul mayor probably has their eye on presidency in the future, and what happens in Seoul will eventually happen across the country. It's unfortunate that some of these candidates are, you bringing out, literally just out of the blue, bringing Seoul pride into the equation.
And it did feel that way. It really felt like a drop. I think that's a great way to say that. It really was, like I said, it was I'm on Jeju, so we have a whole different thing going on down here. But to hear these surprising statements, and so homophobic, was just a little surprising.
Well, I remember, I think it was Moon who came out on right before the end of his
came out.
Campaign, and said he's against discrimination, but he does not support legalizing homosexuality or marriage in Korea. And he did that right before, I believe, if my memory serves me right. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned COVID-19, because COVID-19 has had a way of affecting minority groups, because
negatively,
How has the transgender LGBT community in Seoul, if you know of, how have they weathered the pandemic?
Well, back in May, you had the, Itaewon outbreak, which affected the gay club scene in Itaewon mostly. It's funny because looking back, it was only a few hundred, in total, a few hundred cases.
Right.
In retrospect,
which is less than the daily number at the moment in Korea. And yet all hell broke loose. Again, it was an unfortunate situation. It was a perfect situation to shift responsibility onto a marginalized community. And it was pretty disturbing how the media reported on this in the first instance, and the way they portrayed it, the words they used, the pictures they used. They put topless people as a pic. I mean, one media in particular put topless people as a kind of a stock image. It was pretty disturbing how it was portrayed. And unfortunately, in the process, some people might have been outed or not in order to come forward to get tested. Because if you're in a company and then you say, well, I need to get tested because it's pretty obvious I was in Itaewon, then that means you might be automatically outing yourself. So I think there was a little bit of a heartbreaking issue for certainly some people. But on the other hand, it was the number one news. And on portal websites and on Twitter, the words LGBTQ, sexual minority, gay were top trending words through portal websites and, social media. And it was the top news. So you would flick the channels, KBS, JTBC, YTN, and this was the top news. And the top image was these clubs, which until that time, no one even knew existed.
Right.
And, your regular, people who have no knowledge of any of this, even the community,
The
have
scene,
no idea,
yeah.
just absolutely nothing, were exposed to it. And I think a lot of people probably did feel a little bit sorry for, I mean, of course, on the one hand, you have a lot of hate speech online generated by the same vocal minority. On the other hand, I think a lot of people did feel like a little bit sorry for what was going on. But like I said, it was the first time, I think it's the first time that I see that there's been so much visibility on TV and in news. And I think because there was such a big backlash, especially from international media outlets reporting on the homophobic situation in Korea, it looks very shameful on the ground here. And then I think people realized very quickly. And also there was backlash from NGOs and, Human Rights Commission. And even some government officials did say basically don't be discriminatory. So then I think the tone changed a few days later, and some of these media that were running these awful or sensational headlines, I don't even think because they're necessarily homophobic media themselves, but just because they thought it was okay to refer to certain people in a certain way, just because they have no idea. But
Not
then
educated.
Just not educated.
Right.
And then I think the narrative changed a little bit. And some of these same media flipped the story around and then did reports on this hidden community and literally giving them a voice. So it might have been bad for some people, but I think overall it gave more exposure than anyone could have possibly dreamt of in a positive way.
It's forcing a confrontation, at least. You have to acknowledge the fact that that these people live among us. They're part of our community.
Yeah.
Right.
And just, based on these reports, pretty normal people with normal faces and normal names,
Office jobs and, nothing out of the ordinary.
Exactly.
Well, that's great, Raphael. Thank you very much for being with us. This has been really insightful, and we'll have you back on again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
No problem at all. Thank you so much.
Bye.